If you're buying a home in Connecticut, one of the biggest misconceptions about your real estate closing attorney is we only show up the day of closing with a stack of paperwork that we make you sign, and that's all we do. Well, if you're buying or selling in the state of Connecticut, I'm going to tell you your closing attorney is working behind the scenes very hard for weeks before we even walk into the closing room. Because if nobody else is handling issues that are coming up behind the scenes, you could end up with title issues. You could end up with closing delays. You could end up with unexpected expenses and even possibly have your closing fall apart at the last minute. Hi, I'm attorney Kishore Kapoor, a residential real estate closing attorney in the state of Connecticut. We share real life stories from past experiences. Don't worry, all the names have been changed to protect the innocent, but we're there to share those stories with you so you can have a stress-free and smooth closing. So I'm going to share a couple stories today with you, mainly two, and one's going to be representing a buyer, one's going to be representing a seller. So we represented a buyer. Buyer, blah, everything was smooth, right? They didn't worry about anything. Inspection went well. The appraisal went well. The mortgage approved his loan, and he got the keys to his house. That looks straightforward, smooth, and easy. But what he didn't see was me working behind the scene, right? So one of the things that your closing attorney is doing is we're doing a title search. We're looking at the land records to make sure that there are no issues with the ownership of your property. Well, for this client, unfortunately, there was an unreleased mortgage from a previous owner. It happens. It's common. It's not something we needed to worry about, but it's something that we need to resolve. So the point I'm sharing this for is we are working behind the scenes and we're solving problems you don't even know that come up, right? That client had no idea that there was a title issue. And why would they? Why do I need to add that stress to them? I don't, right? If I know that we're going to resolve it and it's not going to cause a delay, I don't want to pick up the phone and call a client and stress them out because I know it's stressful applying for a mortgage. I know it's stressful finding a home. I know it's stressful for doing an inspection. It is a stressful process. And if there's one or two things I could take off your plate as your closing attorney, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to call you every week to tell you nothing has changed, right? That can add stress to your life. What I tell my clients is very simple. If you don't hear from me, it's a good thing, right? You don't want to hear from me. That being said, it doesn't mean you can't call me with questions, but you don't want to hear from me because when I'm calling you, there's something wrong. If you don't hear anything, that means everything is going smoothly. And it's that simple. Now, on the flip side, when we handle a closing for a seller, again, it's stressful, but it's different stress because the seller's not applying for a mortgage. They might be looking for a new house, right? And that could be stressful trying to handle both those closings. A seller can be stressed out with the move. It is not easy to move. If you haven't moved in your life, you're lucky. The most stressful part of a closing is packing up your stuff and moving out. And unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to help with that other than recommend go hire a moving coordinator and they'll take care of everything. If you need a recommendation for that, reach out to me. I have a great one. But we represented a seller who was selling her home, and on her side, everything looked perfect, right? Buyer got their mortgage. A buyer went into the inspection. The inspection was clear, no issues. Buyer got the house appraised. It appraised. We scheduled closing. Everything went off smoothly. She had her stress of moving, obviously, but she didn't have the stress of dealing with issues from her closing because we took care of them all. We ordered the mortgage payoff. Well, something didn't seem right on the mortgage payoff, so I got to work figuring out what was going on. And it turns out that they had miscalculated something. And because I'm her attorney, I reviewed it and worked through it and got it worked out. She had no idea that issue even came up, right? Because why am I going to add that stress again to a client who's stressed out about moving out of her house that she had lived in for 30 years, having to pack up everything, how to get clear this, how to do that. She's got enough stress. So why not be able to take one thing off of your plate when you're buying or selling a house? So here are a few lessons, right? Your closing attorney, either on the buy side or the sell side, we're looking at the title. We're making sure there's no liens that are missed or that you weren't aware of, that there's no ownership issues, and that there's no mortgage release that haven't been released from a prior owner. We're coordinating with everyone. We're working with lenders and agents and the buyer and the seller to coordinate a closing date, right? To get everybody together so that the buyer who wants a house gets a house and a seller who wants money gets money. That's simple. We coordinate that. We review all the numbers. On the buy side, we're balancing typically the day before we close, right? So if you're expecting to have your closing figures a week before, it is very difficult for us to come up with an accurate number until the day before we close. It might be two, but typically it's a day or two before we close. We're coordinating with the buyer if we're on the sales side to get their information. We're coordinating with the seller to get all their information for the payoffs and whatever debts they need to clear. If there's tax bills, grabbing those, water bills, sewer. So we're going through on the seller side and collecting all of the seller's figures. Flip side, on the buyer side, we're coordinating with the seller and we're coordinating with the lender. And we're going to put all those figures together for you, and we try to get them to you the day before we close. Sometimes, unfortunately, it happens the morning of. It does take time. The biggest thing you are doing as your closing attorney on the buy side or the sell side is that we are finding issues that came up, resolving them before you know. And sometimes you don't even know because, like I've said a couple times before, I don't want to add stress to you. The closing process can be stressful on its own. Why do I want to add more to you when it's something I can deal with and solve, right? I'm a stress reliever. I take stress off your plate so you don't have to deal with it. And a lot of times you don't even realize the stress exists because it's all done behind the scenes. Like I said, most of our work is done in the background, invisible, right? Most people only see what happens at the day of closing together for an hour-ish, right? But the real work had started weeks before that. And if I'm doing my job correctly, you don't even have to know half of it. So if you're buying a home in the state of Connecticut or selling a home in the state of Connecticut, please, if you learn nothing else in this video, take this with you. Don't wait for the last minute to hire a closing attorney because the real work starts day one after we go under contract. There are things that your closing attorney can get done to save time and stress and money. Be sure to follow us so you don't end up one of the stories on my channel, because every day I share real life stories from real estate closings so you can understand what happens behind the scenes and you can have a smooth and stress-free closing. And if you'd like to learn my tips on buying a house in 2026, watch this video.